The best removal in EDH is any removal which can help give you an asymmetric resource advantage. There are many different resources in Magic the Gathering, the most common being cards, but there are other important resources such as mana and time. When it comes to removal, cards which give you card advantage are usually the most powerful. For example, Ruinous Ultimatum is a one-sided board wipe. If each of your opponents has 4 non-land cards in play, then successfully using this card means you trade your 1 card for 12 of your opponent's permanents. This would be called a 12 for 1. However, if instead of Ruinous Ultimatum you cast Ondu Inversion, which destroys your own permanents as well, this effect would no longer be inherently asymmetrical. In fact, if you tap out to cast this spell on your turn, then your opponents are each going to get an opportunity to rebuild their boards before you rebuild your own board, which means you actually lose the resource of time relative to your opponents. Of course, it could be the case your opponents have much better cards than you have out, and therefore it's still worth casting Ondu Inversion, but you need to be aware of the trade-off you're making to know if it is in fact worth it. There are ways to make board wipes asymmetric. For example, in my legendary tribal deck, I run Urza's Ruinous Blast. Because this deck only has 1 non-land, non-legendary permanent, this card usually hits nothing of mine while eliminating everything from mana rocks to non-legendary threats my opponents have. There are actually lots of board wipes which only target permanents of a certain type, or color, or some other property like creature power, and if your deck is built to take advantage of them, these are by far the best board wipes you can run, and successfully casting one can often win you the game. You can also play with a commander like Zurgo and then run a ton of board wipes to have an asymmetric effect, or you can run Child of Alara and then only run indestructible non-land permanents to also create an asymmetric effect. Or you can make decks which have reliable graveyard recursion, so even if the board wipes destroy your own stuff, you can be confident you'll have the ability to return more cards to play than your opponents. You can also use repeatable effects to develop card advantage. For example, Aura Shards lets you blow up an artifact or enchantment whenever a creature enters under your control, or a commander like Tessa or Jav Scion gives you repeatable creature removal. None of this is to say I don't run cards like Swords to Plowshares, which are at best a 1-for-1 effect. In fact, I'll even cast Swords to Plowshares on an opponent's commander, which isn't even technically a 1-for-1 since I'm simply returning the commander to the command zone where they can cast it again for more mana. In that situation, I'm trading my card advantage for a different resource: time. Also, if the commander costs more than 1 mana, there's the mana advantage to look at too. For example, if my opponent spends their entire turn 8 to cast the Ur Dragon, and then I spend my turn 8 removing the Ur Dragon while also casting a 7-drop of my own, I've taken advantage of the low mana cost of Swords to Plowshares to both remove my opponent's commander and build out my own board state. In this situation, I'm trading one of my resources, cards, for 2 other resources, time and mana. Speaking of time, you can also use time to make board wipes asymmetric. If I have a Wrath effect in my opening hand, I likely won't play any creatures until after turn 4 or 5 when I cast the Wrath effect. As a side note, early game board wipes are more likely to be effective as people are less likely to have the mana available to cast a protection spell like Teferi's Protection or Heroic Intervention. You can even build your deck with the plan you'll wipe the board before committing creatures to play. For example, with my Gisela Enchantment deck, I rarely play creatures other than her, who costs 7 mana, and for the creatures I do play, most of them benefit me if they die. So this deck is built with the game plan in mind that I will wipe the board once or twice before I commit any of my own creatures to the board. One of the bigger mistakes I see people make when building and playing their decks is making creature-heavy decks with a ton of symmetrical board wipes. If you're running decks that plan to commit a lot of creatures to the board, but also are running Wrath effects, what's your plan to develop advantage against your opponents using that Wrath effect? Remember, it costs you 1 card to wipe the board, so if you lose just as many creatures as your opponents do, you'll end up losing more cards overall than each individual opponent. Plus, if they cast something like Heroic Intervention, you've probably just handed that player the game. Is that a risk you want to take, or would you rather prioritize asymmetric board wipes or just playing more of your own threats in the first place? Another point I want to make is that if you can wipe the board and build your own board using a single card, that is ideal. In my Giada Angel Waifu tribal deck, I run Sunblast Angel, which destroys all tapped creatures when ETBs. It's easy for me to play around its ability to avoid hitting my own stuff, and because it's a permanent, it advances my own board state rather than just being something I throw into the graveyard. Plus, because it's an angel, it synergizes with the rest of my deck. So for example, it's uncounterable with Cavern of Souls, it draws me a card off Folk Hero, and of course it enters with additional counters on it thanks to Giada's ability. ability. In casual battlecruiser EDH, it's worth paying the extra mana to have your removal attached to a body which can attack and block for you. Acidic Slime isn't often played these days, but it's still an ideal EDH card. Not only does it hit 3 different permanent types, but it has Death Touch, so you'll likely be able to use it to kill a creature which attacks you. Plus, most green decks run cards like the Great Henge or Guardian Project, so when it enters, you might be able to draw a card. So because it destroys a permanent on ETB, possibly kills an attacking creature, and could even draw you a card in the right deck, this card has the potential to be a 3-for-1, whereas something like Nature's Claim will probably only ever be a 1-for-1. And if there aren't any artifacts or enchantments out, Nature's Claim can just be a dead card. Whereas because Acidic Slime is an effective blocker, it can be worth playing even if you don't want to blow up anything with its ETB ability. Just to be clear, that isn't to say Acidic Slime is objectively better than Nature's Claim. If I build a deck which cares about life gain or life gain triggers, then Nature's Claim might become the more efficient card. With every single card you run, you need to place it holistically within the context of your entire deck and its strategy. There's nothing wrong with running 1-for-1 cards. Cards like Beast Within and Green Beast Within are fantastic because they hit any permanent and are almost always relevant cards. And in general, cards which hit more permanent types or the types of permanents most common in your play group are better. However, if part of your strategy is running generically good 1-for-1s which don't synergize with the rest of your deck, you need to be thinking about how the rest of your deck is going to work to develop card advantage against your opponents. Otherwise, you risk ending up in games where despite your best efforts to remove all of your opponent's busted permanents, you inevitably run out of cards and end up finding yourself getting run over by some random 4/5 flyer.